Good morning and welcome, everyone. I'm going to get started while Sarah pulls up our PowerPoint presentation for you. Today's session is designed to provide you with information regarding the general supervision and monitoring activities and timelines for special purpose private schools that are in the 2025-26 cohort, as well as an opportunity to ask questions. We're going to start with introductions of my team. So myself, I am Mary Adley. I'm the coordinator for state agency programs on the Office of Special Services and Inclusive Education.
I'm on.
And I'm going to have my education specialists introduce themselves in the order of their longevity on my team. So we'll start with Fergie.
Good morning, everyone. Sarah Ferguson. I work on Mary's team, and I do go by Fergie now, as we have more than one Sarah on our team. But you can, call me whatever, as long as it's not late to dinner, right? That's what they say.
Oh my gracious.
Leora.
Hi, I'm Leora Byris, and I also work for Mary's team.
And last but certainly not least, the face of our team.
Kimberly Holmes, Director of Education here at Sweetser.
Sarah.
Oops, can you guys hear me?
Yep.
Kimberly Holmes, Director of Education here at Sweetser. We do have other staff joining as well. Or maybe they're already on. Sorry, we've got a lot going on here this morning.
It's all good. We're waiting for Sarah McLaughlin to introduce herself to our cohort. Thank you, Kim.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Sarah McLaughlin. I'm the new office specialist supporting Mary's team, the state agency programs team. I also support the fiscal team and special projects at OSSI at the Department of Education. So you might be hearing from me a lot in different capacities, but I'm happy to join Mary's team, and I'm always here to help.
Mary, you're muted.
Oh, thank you. Sorry about that. I don't know how that happened. I must have hit my space bar.
Uh-oh. And Sarah, we're not seeing it in presentation mode. We're just seeing the PowerPoint in work mode. And the different screen. Perfect. Thanks.
Barbara was unable to join us today, folks, Barbara McGowan. So I'll be providing her an overview of her fiscal information later in the presentation.
And we had a question in the chat about the PowerPoint, and we will send it out after the meeting. So you folks will all get a copy of it in your email, as well as it will be posted on the on our webpage so that you can reference it.
Thank you. And Sarah.
The DOE mission: to promote the best learning opportunities for all Maine students by providing information, guidance, and support to our schools, educators, and leaders, and by providing adequate and equitable school funding and resources. The department's strategic goals: inspire trust in our organization and our public education system, develop, support, and sustain a robust educator workforce, promote education, excellence, and equity for all Maine learners, ensure student and school safety, health, and well-being, support a culture of innovation and continuous improvement, build a healthy and collaborative work environment, strengthening the potential of the Maine DOE and its staff.
Thanks. Let's begin with a general supervision flowchart to provide a visual depiction of the monitoring process for special purpose private schools. And that's very tiny font, so thank you, Sarah, for zooming in. You folks may refer to the flowchart as desired while I provide an overview of the desk audit and the site visit. An overview of the specific elements of the desk audit and the site visit will be provided during the webinar today, a more deep explanation of those components. There's a letter of notification and instruction that we sent out last month. informing the fiscal year 26 SPPS cohort of the date and time of the webinar today. The special purpose private school monitoring process has two components: the site visit activities and the desk audit sections. The process for both components mirrors each other. So after evidence is submitted and reviewed, a letter of finding, or an LOF, is sent to both SPPSs and their referring SAU partners, which you folks identified for us. Thank you. When the elements in the site visit and the desk audit are each fulfilled, a letter of approval is sent. Corrective evidence that is submitted will be reviewed as it comes in until the due date. And if there are outstanding elements from either the desk audit or the site visit, a corrective action plan will be issued. And again, corrective evidence will be reviewed as it's submitted. And a final continued approval letter will be issued to the special purpose private school when all the elements in the cap are satisfied. And if, obviously, if there's no cap warranted, because everything has been taken care of through the findings process, then that letter of continued approval will happen at that point. Once every 3 years or more frequently after the special purpose private school tiered monitoring system is implemented, each SPPS will be monitored to evaluate out-of-unit placements as outlined in MUSER and to ensure continued approval status. Each SPPS has been placed into a monitoring cohort for the purpose of monitoring special education activities in these schools. A table capturing each fiscal year's SPPS monitoring cohorts is on the DOE website. The General System of Supervision and Monitoring forms that the State Agency Programs team uses were emailed to the cohort previously. Thank you, Sarah. And we'll be pausing periodically throughout the presentation today to see if you have questions, as well as to engage in formative assessment activities. And anybody here will earn an A for today if you will raise your hand and volunteer to tell your colleagues here the purpose of formative assessments. Who wants to be brave and tell us what formative assessments are for? Anybody?
You can put are to monitor continual progress and to take that data to use to ensure that our instruction is meeting the students' needs.
Thank you very much. Yes, if you hit it right on the head. It's to inform instruction and know when students have made adequate progress and are able to move along in their on their goals and through the curriculum. So the scope and sequence of the curriculum. Thank you very much. Feel free to call or email the members of the OSSI team, State Agency Programs team, if you think of questions after the webinar, and we'll review our contact information at the end of the slide presentation. So you'll have that, as Fergie noted. This will be sent to you after the webinar today. And this webinar is being recorded, and the link will be put on our Special Services DOE website so that you and your staff can access it as needed. We would like to briefly review the events in the general supervision monitoring process before talking about each component in more depth. You've already received your letter of notification and instruction, and we will outline the relevant information pertaining to the LONI on the next slide. We're going to conduct site visits in the summer and fall this year with backup days in the winter if necessary. Sarah McLaughlin's going to work with each agency to identify preferred times for the site visits for each location in their organization. At each site visit, the department has historically reviewed student files, interviewed students and staff, and toured the facility. A 1.5-hour exit interview to debrief the site visit portion of the review will be scheduled for another day over Zoom. The activities that occur during the site visit, including classroom observations and interviews, are meant to be proactive and support SPPSs as they refine the desk audit components, such as adequacy of services, continuum of services, education environment, and plan of instruction. and recommendations made during the site visit that are adequately addressed prior to the subsequent desk audit will result in no finding for that desk audit component. The desk audit submissions are due January 2nd, 2026. So the list of events that we reviewed today may not necessarily be in the order that they will occur for your SPPS, especially if unexpected events require scheduled visits to be postponed and rescheduled. Sometimes that happens to illness or weather events. Each SPPS will receive 2 separate letters of findings. The site visit letter of finding upon completion of the site visit activities, which may occur over multiple on-site visits, as well as virtual follow-up interviews and/or observations. And that will be issued approximately a month after completion of the site visit activities, and the desk audit letter of finding by March 6th of 2026. The letters will be issued and communicate if there were findings of concern within the program that might affect approval status. The SPPS will have time between the letter of finding and May 29th of 2026 to resolve any identified areas requiring resolution or revision. SPPS file review corrective activity is for future work rather than fixing past errors for SPPSs. And if training is required to address multiple findings in the file review, please send only one letter that includes attached evidence of all trainings for all the file review findings. For example, out of Unit 5, ISR 1, and IEP 1. In addition, for IEP file review findings, please send IEPs developed after the findings were issued, which can be annual reviews, amendments, or drafts if not yet approved and issued by the SAU. It's expected that 5 students' IEPs will show evidence for all the identified areas requiring correction on IEPs, and only 3 of those of which would address transition corrective activity elements, because those are only applicable to a subset of your SPPS population if you serve high school students. So a total of 5 IEPs per SPPS site to demonstrate all necessary correction. We don't want any extra work for you or for us. If any of the corrections identified in the letters of finding remain outstanding as of May 29th, 2026, the department will issue a corrective action plan, or a CAP, to address those findings. And if all matters are resolved before the due date, the department will issue a letter acknowledging the successful completion of monitoring and consequently continued school approval. Note, only the portions of the IEP relevant to the SPPS monitoring will be evaluated on IEPs that are selected for review, that you guys, and yes, you guys select those for the file review that you want us to review. And when you're sending additional evidence that's required, we ask that you please only scan, print, or copy the sections of the IEP that are requested for evidence review, rather than the whole IEP. The only exception to that might be if we're looking at annual progress for either academic or functional goals. And isolated deficiencies that are discovered during the file review that impact the provision of FAPE will need to be corrected and will be reported to the federal monitoring team. For example, neglecting to reduce the total specially designed instruction time by the amount of time the student receives related services at the frequency that's determined by the IEP team. That could result in compensatory education awarded through due process proceedings, and it would be viewed as a violation of FAPE, free appropriate public education. The SPPS will provide evidence to address the elements identified in the CAP by October 3rd of 2026. And once the evidence for the CAP has been submitted and approved, DOE will issue an approval letter. And those approval letters will be issued by November 21st of 2026. You don't need to, again, wait until the due date to submit evidence for either the letter of findings or the CAP. Our monitoring is designed as an interactive process to support, honestly, we hope, just like you, that we don't have CAPs. And we're here to support you through the process. So feel free to reach out to any of us at any time. The DOE Special Services Fiscal Team is joining the State Agency Programs team for FY2026 SPPS General Supervision Cohort. And the information pertinent to this portion of the review will be presented on Barbara's behalf later in the presentation. The purpose of the letter of notification is to inform the special purpose private school of its inclusion in the current cohort of general supervision and monitoring during the 25-26 school year. We sent notification about this webinar to all the SAUs that each SPPS has identified as having current or pending student enrollments, and we appreciate those districts that have been able to take the time to join us today. The LONI describes the two components of the general supervision process in which documentation is submitted to the SAP team in a desk audit. The first element, program approval documents, is outlined in sections 1 through 11 in the table, containing all the criteria found in the program approval section of MUSER, along with some additional Title 20A program requirements from general school approval, such as credentials of staff and Chapter 33. The evidence to be submitted in support of those criteria is also described in the table. For the second part, Section 12, SPPSs will do a self-audit to review student files that they maintain on a certain number of students to document whether the records reviewed contained all the required materials. This self-audit tool has been developed and revised to be consistent with the tool that's used by the federal or public school monitoring team. The format for the SPPS self-audit review is currently under revision from an Excel workbook format to a process through Microsoft Forms, which Leora will be reviewing with you later in this webinar. The SAP team will be using the same Excel workbook version of the on-site review tool for site visit file reviews as has been used historically. The elements in the Excel OSR tool are the same file review elements that the SPPSs will evaluate their files while using the new, more user-friendly process of Microsoft Forms. This self-audit revision was recently implemented by the federal monitoring team and met with excellent feedback from the SAUs. In fact, I see someone in our group today that could attest to that and had outreach to our team to see if we were going to make that same change, because it is such a more user-friendly process than the workbook. In review, Sarah McLaughlin is in the process of scheduling site visits for each location in your organization. While on site, the department will review student files, interview staff and students, and tour the facility or campus. And during subsequent Zoom meetings, conduct an exit interview. And if there's any, before that, obviously, if there's any follow-up from the day that we spend with you. The exit interview will be to debrief the site visit portion of the review. And as I just noted, sometimes additional on-site visits and virtual meetings are scheduled to complete classroom observations and interviews. The site visits will continue to be planned as in-person events with a pivot if circumstances warrant it. Our state agency programs team appreciates everyone's flexibility and emphasizes the necessity for us to maintain communication regarding circumstances that might warrant alternate plans, again, whether it's illness or inclement weather, so that both parties can observe each organization's health and safety, employee and visitor policies and procedures. Prior to the site visit, each SPPS will receive a site visit letter from the department confirming the date and reviewing the expectations for the site visit. We ask that the director of the program be present to assist in the site visit activities. If the director of the program is unavailable for the full day, DOE asks that the director's assistant or program coordinator or some designee be available during the times the director is not available. During the site visit, the SAP team wants to offer your SPPS live professional development. We encourage you to allow at least one special ed teacher or whomever writes the IEPs to sit with DOE staff and review the elements of an IEP that's included in the student files that you select for us to review for an IEP that person drafted. Teachers will be able to get feedback, ask questions about required forms, IEPs, or anything that's related to special education. And staff participating should be focusing on an IEP, again, that they have drafted and are implementing or having oversight of programming for. And please make sure there's a confidential workspace for the state agency programs team to review 10 student records, which may be a shared space where the interviews are scheduled, being mindful of the need to sometimes spread out files during a file review, depending on whether they're electronic or actual files, and the number of individuals that will be utilizing that shared space, and room ventilation capacities. There should be access to a copier or scanner for the file review elements. And for agencies with multiple sites, we request that all files be at one site, and we'll work together to determine which site. There may be exceptions to that. And as my team planned this current cohort. And so Leora will work with you about those things. And traveling throughout Maine for monitoring, the SAP team arrives to begin the day by 8:30. And within the day, we're going to need time to do the following activities, some of which will be happening at the same time. So an administrative interview, preferably somewhere near the beginning of the day. We like that because it helps give us context for the rest of the day. Tour the facility and our campus and classroom observations. We would like to do this during a time that we can observe students working. We also want to make sure that we're able to observe a couple of entire class periods from beginning to end, reviewing 10 student files, conducting interviews, 2 teachers together, 2 ed techs together, 2 related service providers together, and 2 students with parental consent individually and with adult support that's desired, if so desired by each student. And then also have a working lunch. We want to invite folks to join us to have general discussions that not necessarily related to the review. And the consent that we were just talking about, or that I just referenced a moment ago for student interviews form was included in the materials. It will be sent with materials. Sorry about that. And completed and signed consent forms should be placed in student files. We don't need copies. The department doesn't need a physical copy. We just need to make sure you have consent, and the consent form is put in the student file. The monitoring team is flexible and willing to accommodate a school's particular needs around scheduling. Zoom site visit debriefs can be conducted with whomever the school chooses. We've had some debriefs with just the SPPS director, others with the entire SPPS applicable staff, and some with special administrators from SAU, referring SAUs, and any combination of those scenarios. We are flexible and happy to provide you and your team with feedback and observations to the audience that your agency determines is beneficial. So you will send you an invite, and you can, part of the instructions will be to forward it to whomever you'd like to invite. And Leora.
Pardon me, I could not unmute myself. So if your site uses, if your organization uses electronic student files, a digital platform, please reach out to me so that we can make a plan for me to access those files. We've encountered this format twice since I joined the team, and we've handled it a couple of different ways. So what we don't want you to do is make paper copies of all of the required documents, because that is a very heavy lift. So please reach out to me, and we will talk, and we'll make a plan for the easiest way for me to get into the platform, or for you to facilitate that so that you're not having a lot of extra work.
Thank you, Leora.
Yes.
Does anybody have any questions about the materials covered before we move on to the submission guidelines for the desk audit? while we pause to see if there's questions. I'm just going to let you know after we answer any questions that you might have. We're going to have you participate in a brief 2-question formative assessment that Leora created. Any questions? No, I don't see anything in the chat.
Sarah, can you let me share? Oh, thank you. I should have realized that you were right there. Okay.
Can you put the link in the chat?
Oh, yes,
So,
I will do that. Just a
that's fine.
moment.
You're going to either scan the code that's on its way up on the screen, or go to the link that is going to be put in the chat to answer the 2 questions. And I just want to take a brief moment to thank you, Leora, for modeling an easy way to embed quick formative assessments that are interactive and provide instructional data for educators to use to inform student instruction. It's also an easy and interactive way for you directors to evaluate PD that you provide for your staff too. And Leora will be sharing the live poll results for you to as participants to see.
Yes, I will.
And then after this, we'll turn the webinar over to Sarah Ferguson to begin reviewing the desk audit.
Okay, have folks had a chance to go in and answer those questions? I hope. I am just going to share my screen, and we're just going to take a little quick peek at the responses. So we have 13 responses. So I'm going to go ahead and view those. So we have 2 questions. So there are 2 parts of the monitoring process. Please choose the correct pair. And the choices, you were all 100% right. There's a desk audit and a site visit. Thank you for that. And the second is the site directors don't need to plan to be on site. And that's a true or false. And you are all 100% correct. That is false. So thank you very much. And I will stop sharing so that we can get back to the PowerPoint.
And Fergie.
All right. So we're going to walk through each section of the desk audit. You received the desk audit instructions in your letter of notification, and the materials are due by January 2nd of 2026. You received the table containing the approval criteria along with the description of the materials associated with each of the criteria that you'll submit for your desk audit. You'll submit specific pieces of information, which we'll discuss in detail in a few minutes. We prefer electronic submissions. Please provide all desk audit materials by sending evidence for each element into separate, clearly labeled attachments to the email address sppsgss.doe@maine.gov. I remember that email address because it is the SPPS General Systems of Supervision. So that's where those letters come from. One email is preferred. However, sometimes email settings prohibit a large file size and more than one email is required. Some SPPSs have submitted folders through Google Docs or OneNote. If you do send materials in print form or hard copy, you will need a 3-ring binder or organizer with 12 tabs. Each tab will coincide with a section of the table found in the letter of instruction. And when the binder comes to the Maine DOE, each tab should contain the materials supporting that criterion. The materials may be emailed, mailed, or hand-delivered to our office and are due by 5 p.m. on January 2nd, 2026. For agencies or organizations with more than one site, please provide one single submission for the agency or organization containing the elements that are common across your SPPS locations, such as the mission of the school or the plan of instruction. Elements that relate to specific schools, such as qualification of staff, can be sent in separate emails using the organizational format outlined in the table on the letter of instruction with separate attachments for electronic submissions or separate tabs for a binder submission for each category. This image depicts the 12 sections of the SPPS school approval criteria table included in your letter of instruction that you'll be utilizing to construct your desk audit materials. Let's begin reviewing the items on the table. The first section includes admission requirements and the general description of the program. This approval element can be found in Title 20A, Section 7204, and MUSER, Section 12, Paragraph 2. For this element, please send in your administrative policy manual and your parent handbook with documented dates of approval by your board of directors with substantial and appropriate policies and procedures regarding the general description of your program, the mission of your program, the disability groups served, your grade levels served, your capacity to address referral behavioral concerns, your mentions of how the transfer and 30-day IEP meetings are held, and your admission and discharge policies and procedures. Section 2 is about the educational environment, and it's made up of 5 parts. This approval element can be found in Title 20A, Section 7204, and MUSER, Section 12, Paragraph 2. For the first part, Part A, please describe how your SPPS provides a school environment to students that is safe, healthy, and appropriate. And for the second part, Part B, please provide your board-approved dated policies and procedures to specifically reference student access to health and medical services as specified in the SPPS initial application, Part 12. So that includes your healthcare plan. You're going to attach a plan for healthcare of students, including the following: provisions made for the medical, nursing, and infirmary care of students, training by a physician or registered nurse to all staff that administer medication to students. And to continue, your policy for emergency first aid and care that includes the following: the training of all direct service staff in emergency first aid, the secure storage of adequate first aid supplies, the posting of telephone numbers for the fire department, police station, poison prevention center, hospital emergency room, and ambulance service, providing coverage to your school, the procedures to be followed in the case of illness or emergency, such as motor vehicle accidents, including methods of transportation and notification of parents, the procedures to be followed in the case of fire or other types of emergency, the procedures for informing parents of any medical care administered to their child or of any injury or illness that requires care other than basic first aid, and the procedures to be followed in the case of illness or emergency if parents cannot be reached. And continuing now with Part C, you'll provide a description of your innovative activities and programming. This is your chance to show off what you do at your school for your students and with your students that meet these criteria. Please also provide for Part D your multi-tiered systems of support for both academic and positive behavioral interventions and support. And the last of the educational environment is Part E, your safety protocols, as necessary for program elements with increased risk during activities such as kitchens, heavy machinery, auto shops, carpentry, and rock wall climbing. And that is the end of Section 2. Moving on to Section 3, we will be looking for the qualification of staff. This approval element can be found in Title 20A, Section 7204, and MUSER again, Section 12, Paragraph 2. The documentation for all staff for this element shall include your special education service provider form. This form applies to the desk audit, Sections 3, 6, and 7. So you will see lots of pictures of it, but please only send it once in Section 7. And the schedule of appropriate supervision of ed techs as outlined in MUSER 10-2A6 and Chapter 115. Reporting of staff qualifications is also a requirement for general annual school approval, so we'll be able to access that information. For anyone that was employed by your school and reported on your annual general school approval application submission to the DOE Office of School and Student Supports. So we only ask that you provide certification or license number for your educational staff that have been hired after you submitted your documentation to the DOE. So on this form, there is a column about whether or not they were hired before or after July 1st. And so we're only asking for this certification information if they were hired after July 1st. We are asking for the license number for all of your related service providers. This should be reported so that the SPPS monitoring team can verify respective staff certification and license statuses. You might design your own way of reporting this information, or you may use this Special Education Services Provider Certification form that you have already and will again receive electronically after this presentation. Streamlining our request for data has resulted in this sample form, which collects data for some elements, like I said, of Section 3 and 6, and for all of Section 7 in the desk audit. All elements of Section 3A that I just reviewed are captured on this form. And please send this form only once in Section 7, making a note in Sections 3 and 6 to see Section 7. An additional document is needed for Section 3B, which captures your schedule of appropriate supervision of ed techs. Moving on to Section 4, this approval element can be found in Title 20A, Section 7204, and MUSER, Section 12, Paragraph 2. The MUSER language for professional supervision includes at least one full-time staff member shall be designated as the educational administrator for the program. Such person shall be assigned to supervise the provision of special education services in the school and ensure that the services specified in each child's IEP are delivered. Each SPPS must employ an on-site supervisory person, an educational administrator. MUSER outlines 2 pathways, and each have multiple certification options. One pathway is to employ an educational administrator who has either a Special Ed Administrator 030 or an Assistant Director of Special Ed 035 certification. The second pathway requires supervision by an 030 or 035 for a minimum of 5 hours monthly. The educational administrator may hold one of 3 certificates. A Special Ed Consultant Certificate 079, which has been eliminated, but if an employee previously held this certificate and it didn't or does not lapse, then the certification was or will be grandfathered. This person could hold a Special Educator 282 or a Teacher of Children with Severe Impairments, a 286 certification. This is very important. If the educational administrator holds a 282 or 286, they must also have both a master's degree in special education and a 1 year of paid administrative experience. Again, please note that if you use an 079, 282, or 286 as your on-site supervisor, MUSER states that the individual holding that certificate must have at least 5 hours per month of supervision by a Special Education Administrator 030 or an Assistant Director 035. Please include the supervision logs for 11 months of 2025, January through November, in this tab if you're using this latter model of supervision at your SPPS. All right, moving on to Section 5, and I'm sorry, I'm scrolling too much. The Section 5 Plan of Instruction, this approval element can be found in Title 20A, Section 7204, and MUSER, Section 12, Paragraph 2. It asks for the curriculum that you're using in your school. Is it a curriculum adopted from one of your referring SAUs, or do you use your own curriculum? Please submit documentation of the curriculum that you use, including general curricular materials for all 9 content areas and your intervention curricular materials to close ELA and math achievement gaps, and demonstrate that it is in alignment with the Maine learning results. We also ask for a description of the assessments that you are using in your school. User Section 2, Paragraph 4 defines assessment as follows. For children 3 to 22, assessment under Part B means the ongoing procedures used by appropriately qualified personnel to measure the educational and functional achievement of students as related to their IFSP or IEP goals, and on state and district-wide tests which are aligned with Maine learning results. In this section, we want to see how your school is measuring educational and functional achievement and what assessments are being used with the curriculum to measure progress and to demonstrate student proficiency. You should also describe in this section how your school is providing access to the general ed curriculum and to extracurricular activities for your students. What processes do you have in place for this to occur? Please do not send your entire curriculum. Outlines, curricular maps, and links to your online curricula are appropriate. Importantly, we will use your most recent standards-based teaching and learning report to help satisfy parts of this element. So in addition, please do not duplicate what was provided in your 2025 SPPS transition to standards-based learning, teaching, and reporting update. You will also need to submit a 2025-2026 school calendar that demonstrates a minimum of 175 student instructional days, as well as sample classroom schedules that provide an average of 25 hours per week of instructional time for every 2-week period. DOE Rule Chapter 127, number 218, defines instructional time as that portion of a school day devoted to the teaching learning process, but not including extracurricular activities, lunchtime, or recess. Time spent on organized field trips related to school studies may be considered instructional time, but the instructional time counted for extended field trips shall not exceed a normal school day for each day of the field trip. So please be certain that if you are providing functional skills, specially designed instruction during times such as lunch and recess, that your classroom schedules reflect that. Okay, moving on to Section 6, Adequacy of Support Services. This approval element can be found in Title 20A, Section 7204, and also in Muser, Section 12, Paragraph 2. Information for Section A will be documented on the Special Education and Related Services Provider Certification and License Form, submitted also for Sections 3 and 7 that we have discussed. For Section B, we will need a grid of 5 months of your related service hours provided to all students. The 5 months will be 2 months in the spring and summer, and the 3 months of September, October, and November. These services are what's provided by both employed and contracted providers. And they will be coded for reasons for missed services and makeup dates. See sample grids or templates provided. If your agency chooses not to use the DOE form for review, the sample grids and templates that we provide, please send a copy of your form to sppsgss.doe@maine.gov by October 24th, 2025, so that we can review it to determine if it meets everything that we need for information. The sample related service provider grids will be provided in Word format and as an Excel spreadsheet. The Excel spreadsheet is formatted to calculate the data that you enter. These forms were previously sent electronically, and you should fill in the key at the bottom of the form to include any reasons that the student may not receive services. If other is used as a category, it needs to be defined in order to determine whether the missed services need to be made up. Again, if your agency chooses not to use one of the DOE sample forms, please send a copy of your form to the email by October 24th so that the state agency programs team can review it and provide feedback if necessary prior to the desk audit submission. We want to ensure that the necessary components for monitoring are included in a streamlined format to prevent duplication of work for you and your service providers. Your form or system needs to incorporate or include what related services are required and documented on each student's IEP with their frequency and duration. It needs to document the service and times that are delivered, document the service and times that were missed, and document the reasons for the missed services, because not all are required to be made up, and document service and times that were made up with a code such as the use of an asterisk in your reporting system, and tracking of the cumulative service or times owed for each service of the student. Data will be submitted for every related service provider, as we said, including all employed and contracted providers and providers from partner SAUs utilized to serve the students at your SPPS for those 5 months, including 2 months from the spring and or summer of 2025, if your SPPS provided services in the summer, and 3 months from September to November of 2025, included in your program approval submission materials. You also need to submit, for letter C, evidence of individualized treatment using valid and reliable measures to obtain baseline data and progress monitoring, your list of tools and evaluations that are used to inform the service plans. So, Leora, we have talked a lot already. Your turn.
Okay, so we have another check-in. I just put the link in the chat for you, and you can also use the QR code. I am going to share again. So this is just a couple of questions again, just like the last one. Does anyone have any questions for us that you would like to come on? Oops, hold on, let me get to the right one. There we go. That you would like to come off mic and ask?
I have a question.
Yes.
I just can't remember. Are we doing these service grids for all of our students or just for the 10 files we choose for you to review?
All of you students.
Thanks.
Okay, so we have 14 responses. So
Question as well.
Oh, yes, of course.
I'm
Sorry.
sorry. When we were, let me just look at my notes here. We were discussing, qualifications of staff, and you had said that we only need to include information for those hired after July 1st.
Only the one column, Sarah, only the one column of information, just their certification number.
All right, so their certification number only needs to be included for those hired after July 1st, 2025, 2024?
2025.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay, thank you.
Because, yes, because when you do your annual school approval, you'll have all of your staff listed, and that will go through the process from our partners across the floor. And so we just need to have the certification for all of your education staff since then. We do, because related service providers are licensed not through DOE, we do need all of their license numbers so that we can check that their licensure continues to be valid. And there's directions on the top of that, the top row that tells you, who needs to have that column filled and who doesn't. Thanks for asking.
Thank you.
Does anyone else have any questions before we look at the responses?
Sarah and Mary, public schools have a requirement for a school health advisor. Does that pertain to SPPSs as well?
Paul, I'm not really sure because that would be a basic school approval, not a special ed program approval, which is what our monitoring process follows up on. So that's a great question. You could either reach out to Pam Ford Taylor, or I could have somebody on my team do that and get back to you.
If you don't mind, that'd be great.
Excellent. Okay.
Thank you.
Sure.
Aaron,
Hi, Aaron. Oh,
sorry.
go ahead.
So I'm just responding to Paul because I was just looking at my school approval materials. I'm pretty sure we do need to do that, Paul, and because I noticed it in the requirements for school approval that I'm also working through along with all of these requirements, and they are not always exactly the same, but there is a bit of a relationship. So I'm pretty sure that is documented not through this process, but through school approval.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, let's take a quick look at the responses. So please choose the preferred method for submitting documents, and you are all correct that it is email. And related service provider grids should include 2 months of spring, summer, and September through November. 11 of you said it was true. 7 of you said it is false, but it is actually true. So it's a 5-month total with 2 months in spring and summer, and then September, October, November. Thank you very much. I'm going to give this back over to Sarah.
Okay. Moving on to desk audit, section 7. This is the teacher-student ratio and caseloads, and this approval element can be found in Title 20A, Section 4502, and User, Section 10, Paragraph 2. And Section 10. Oh, I'm sorry. User, Section 10, Paragraph 2, both in A and in C. Section 7 information will be documented on this form, Special Education and Related Service Providers Certification and License Form, submitted for Sections 3 and 6 that we discussed. And here you will also need to include the child ratios for self-contained services. For ages 5 to 9, that's 6 students to 1 staff, and up to 11 students if more than 1 staff. For ages 8 to 10 to 14, that's 8 students to 1 staff, and up to 13 students if more than 1 staff. And for ages 15 to 22, that is 10 students to 1 staff, and up to 15 students if more than 1 staff. And we will fix that, that it doesn't say 22. We'll fix that before you folks get this. Note that the MUSER teacher-student ratios only apply to self-contained classrooms, and all other classrooms are subject to the public school teacher-student ratio stated in Title 20A, Section 4502. And so for the record, all of your classrooms at SPPS are self-contained classrooms because SPPS only serves students with disabilities. Moving on to Section 8, the continuum of special education services. This approval element can be found in User Section 12, Paragraph 2. And for this approval element, explain how the services you provide to your students assist them in moving along the educational continuum toward a lesser restrictive environment, including how supports are lessened during the length of stay at your SPPS. Specifically for Section A, provide detailed description of the transition supports provided for students in the census at intake and during the length of stay and during transition to other school settings, including community partner support such as Voc Rehab, utilized during their enrollment at your SPPS and put in place in the community, such as Job Coach, and at the receiving SAU or SPPS. And for Part B, for 5 or more students, list specific examples of individualized, less restrictive opportunities throughout your SPPS enrollment, such as gradual release of supports, access to general education curriculum, access to extracurricular activities, etc., at your SPPS, at the public school, and in the community, supporting movement on the LRE educational continuum that's outlined in user. Provide unique information for 5 students from each SPPS site in your agency. And there's a template for how you can set up your information. In the next slide, here are some examples using the template. So for student Joe Cool from MSAD 4555, his first opportunity, he learned his coping skills and improved his safety. So he transitioned from having 2-to-1 staff to 1-to-1 staff from time of enrollment from January 2023 to August 2023. Another opportunity, he maintained his safe behavior as defined by his behavior plan, and he was able to join community outings in November of 2023. His third opportunity was that your top-notch SPPS staff accompanied the student for 3 weeks at the transition back to public school in April of 2024. And another opportunity was that in May 2024, your top-notch SPPS staff completed your fading supports at the public school and no longer went to MSAD 4555 with Joe Cool. A second student example is Susie Sunshine from RSU 6052. Her first opportunity, she learned coping skills and improved safety, so she transitioned from having full-time 1-to-1 to an as-needed in December of 2024. A second opportunity, she met referral safety and functional goals, and she joined her SAU track team for extracurricular in April of 2025. And lastly, currently, she takes 1 class at public school, and the remainder of her programming is at the SPPS. Continuing with this section, you should also submit your specific discharge data for the past 2 years and include the student name, their date of birth, their disability, their admission date, date discharged, and grade level, and the name of the receiving school or program, and, if applicable, their graduation data. For Section 9, graduation diploma agreements, this is only for those schools who serve students in grades 9 through 12. This approval element can be found in User, Section 12, Paragraph 2. The 25-26 diploma agreement was already sent out to everyone in May. This is something you need to do every year and not just for those monitoring cohorts. This submission includes the copies of your annual graduation work credit agreements with sending schools or schools of residence signed by the SAU high school principal, and evidence of the documentation of data tracking and reports for graduation work and their credit agreements and graduation requirements such as courses, community services, etc., outlined by the SAU. A new work diploma agreement needs to be signed each year for all SAUs that you send to your high schools send your students to in grades 9 to 12. High school diplomas can only be conferred by the building principal, meaning only the principal can sign the diploma agreement. State law prohibits other staff positions such as special ed director or superintendent being the sole signatory. State law does not prohibit additional SAU signatures to meet unique situations such as communities without a high school, if so desired by the high school administrator conferring the diploma. So, in addition to the principal or dean of students, the special education director or superintendent may also sign. Section 10, notification and reporting of changes to the application and notification of serious events. This approval element can be found in Muser paragraph 2. I'm sorry, Muser section 2. I can't say this right. Muser section 12(2) and in Muser 12(2)A and in Muser 12(2)D. And they say, Muser 12(2)A says, the reporting for serious events, policy for immediate notification and reporting for serious events in the event of serious injury or death of a child, criminal activity on the part of a child or staff member, or other serious incidents affecting the well-being of any child. The approved special purpose private school shall immediately notify by telephone and by letter the parents, the sending school districts, any state agency involved in child care or program placement, and the Department of Education. Muser 12(2)D says that any changes to the application, including but not limited to change in personnel, facilities, staffing patterns, or population served, requires the submission and approval of amendments to the relevant portions of the application. It should be noted that these are distinctly different policies of notification legally required, such as mandated reporting. These are Muser expectations. These two pieces are embedded in the following elements of Section 10. Section 10 covers both general private school approval found in Title 20A, Chapter 17, and Muser requirements found in Section 12(2)A and D. The submission includes your SPPS, sending policies of notification and reporting to the Department of issues that would impact the approval status of your school or program as specified in the SPPS initial application Part 13, including any substantial changes to the school's program, any changes in the certificate and/or credentials of its staff, any action taken by a federal, state, or local agency that might jeopardize the school approval with the department, or any legal proceeding brought against the school or its employees arising out of circumstances related to the care or education of any of its students, regardless of their state of residency, any new or revision to existing policies that replace or revise policies described or provided with the application, any changes to the program or facility that impact the overall health or safety of students or the ability to deliver services. And continuing, the immediate notification and reporting of serious events, including serious injury or death of a student, criminal activity on the part of a student or staff member, or other serious incident affecting the well-being of any student, the approved special purpose private school shall immediately notify by telephone and by letter the parents, the sending school district, and any state agency involved in child care or program placement and the Department of Education. Also, any changes in services or staff, including temporary staff shortages that alter previously approved staff-child ratios and or affect the ability to deliver services to students per their IEP, and any change in the program director. Please note that Muser specifies that the notifications in Section 6 situations must occur immediately by both telephone and by letter. And SPPSs have notification requirements for both DHHS and DOE. So we will be looking to make sure that your policy includes all Muser-specific language. For Section B, the following is a link to let us know if you have changes to your school application. Every SPPS needs to complete this 3-question form annually. And if you have no changes to report, you would click no in question 3 and you are done. If you do have changes, you need to click yes in question 3 and then follow the link provided within the questionnaire. And we will put that link in the chat and we will send it to you in the chat. And we'll also send it to you in the email when we're sending these slides. When you click the link the link in the link, when you click the link in the link, you get to see this form. And so here's a snip of the Word doc that is the link in question 3 brings you to. Only fill out the sections that have updates, and you may use this form throughout the year to advise DOE of updates also, if you wish. Moving on to section 11, the rule governing physical restraint and seclusion. This approval element can be found in the Maine Department of Education Rules, Chapter 33. Chapter 33 notes that each covered entity must provide annual overview and awareness information to staff and provide annual notice informing parents of the Chapter 33 rule and the SPPS policy and procedures related to the use of restraint and seclusion, including the local complaint process. Your policy should note when your board of directors last reviewed and approved the policy to ensure the most recent legislative requirements are included in your policy. And for this cohort, it's after June 16th of 2023. All crises intervention curricula will be reassessed for compliance with the updated rule, and every SPPS needs to update their policy in accordance with the changes. In addition, you'll send in documentation of training of the crisis intervention curriculum, including the dates and frequency and a list of participants.
Sarah,
Yes.
before we move on, I know this is inferred, but just because I want to be concrete, on the prior slide where we're talking about filling out the sections of the form that only have changes, that is absolutely true. And we want to make sure folks know that you do need to fill out the demographic information at the top, identifying who you are and what school you're representing before you check off those buttons.
Yes.
Proceed. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so we have another, hold on. Can you go back, Sarah? Thank you. So we have another check-in. Oh, can you go back again? Thank you. Okay, so I am going to press enter. There we go. It's in the chat. And I'm going to share again, and we're going to go over the results. Does anyone have any questions that they would like to ask us while I am pulling this up? All righty, so we have 4 responses. Oh, awesome, you guys are doing great. I'll just wait another second or two, just so everyone has a chance. All right, let's take a peek. So again, this is 2 questions. So we have LRE only applies to public schools, and the answer to that is false. We know that LRE applies to all of our kids. And Chapter 33 only needs to be reviewed when a school is in a monitoring cohort, and the answer is false because it needs to be reviewed annually. Thank you very much for that little assessment. I am going to stop sharing so that we can move on in the PowerPoint, which I believe, oh, maybe I'm not going to start. Nope, I am not going to. Oh, you're going to share through. Okay. All righty. So we're going to go through desk audit section 12, which is your self-audit. So we have thank you very much. So you can see there's some examples of the OSR codes. I believe most of you have been through the process before. So you know that all of the elements have a 3-letter and a number code. For instance, ROA1 is aligned to the requirement to have a record of access in your files. So, see. We have actually changed to a Microsoft form, which I'm going to walk you through in just a couple of slides. But when you're doing your self-assessment, we really want to make sure that we have a good sample of the demographic of students that you work with. Different disabilities, different ages of kids, ethnicities. Oh, Sarah, you can change the slide forward, please. Thank you. So you're going to use the self-assessment form to review 20% of your files, but not less than 10 of your current student files. If your student population is less than 10, then all student files should be reviewed, as well as for the file review during the site visit. So please make efforts to make sure that we have a representative sample across your self-assessment. So we would like to see a variety of disabilities and ages. So a couple of high school kids, if you serve that population, so we can look at transition plans, different ethnicities, different case managers, different SAUs within the SPPS, and then please include state agency client, state ward status as well. There is a Word version of the document of the OSR form, self-assessment form, and it shows you what the code is, and then it tells you what the item in citation is. It tells you the criteria for what a yes and a no are, and then it tells you what the corrective activities are if there is non-compliance found in your files. So we are going to go through the self-assessment together. I am just pulling it up here. I am going to, so we want to go to slide 54.
Leora,
Yes.
Leora, could we pause for just a second so I can make sure that folks are understanding as the self-assessment, if they have findings themselves, that grid that you just went over and talked about is to help them understand how to fix it as a professional development activity, that we do not want any corrective activity sent to the department. It is meant to be a professional development exercise for you in preparation for us to come. So
Thank you for that, Mary.
You're quite welcome.
Okay, so I am going to get over here to the practice self-assessment. Can everybody see the practice self-assessment up on my screen?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. And so you can see, hopefully, did you guys get a chance to see the QR code before I started sharing? That's a good question. I'm going to put this in the chat, the link in the chat, so that you can access it through there. Okay. So I'm just going to go through, or we're going to go through the practice self-assessment together so that any questions that come up, you can ask as we go through it. But please, anytime you are doing this and you come across a question that you can't answer, just email or call, and we are absolutely happy to help you. We don't want you to feel any angst or feel like you're alone, because you're not. So this is the practice self-assessment for the 25-26 SPPS cohort. And what I'm really bad at doing is actually coming up with like names and things on the fly. So hold on just a moment. Why is that not letting me actually, hold on. Okay, there we go. Sorry about that. Okay, so we're going to start with the name of the SPPS. And what should we call our SPPS? Does anyone have a suggestion to help me go through this? Because it would be super duper helpful. Anyone? Okay,
ABC
so
school.
thank you. Thank you, thank you. Oops, I should probably spell it right. Okay, and what about a first name? Oh, and I have Pepper as a first name. Sorry about that. As you can see, we were practicing yesterday to make sure that we have everything going the way that we want it to. The student last name I just put in as due. Her date of birth is 4/8/24. I have the responsible school district as RSU 555. The next question is if the student is a multilingual learner, and that is simply a yes or no. Then there is a section for you to delineate the exceptionality identification. And you can see as I scroll that all 13 disability categories are there. If you have a child who has multiple disabilities, then we ask that you click multiple, and then you click on whatever the multiple disabilities are. So for this student, Pepper, I just picked that she's multiple and she has autism and a traumatic brain injury. So ROA1, this is looking at if there is a sign-in sheet in the student's file to record who has access to the student file. You'll also notice that underneath all of the questions, there is the citation for why we're looking for this information. This is simply a yes or no. Yes, there's a sign-in sheet in the student's file, or no, the sign-in sheet is missing. So element OOU2 is the IEP team's documentation of the program components of a placement that would support the IEP developed at the meeting. And again, you can see that we put in both the IDEA and user citation. So a yes on this question means that the written notice clearly documents the discussion of out-of-unit placement with all of the IEP components specific to the child's needs. A no means that the written notice does not clearly document the discussion of out-of-unit placement with all IEP components specific to the child's needs. It does not ensure LRE discussion and does not demonstrate that the SAU is unable to provide FAPE in the SAU setting. Question number 10 of the self-assessment is OOU3. If the placement is known, a representative of the placement shall be involved in this meeting. If the placement is not known, another IEP team meeting shall be held to discuss the child's program at the new placement. So a yes means that the written notice documents that the members of the IEP team include a representative of the sending and receiving unit as part of the IEP team, or an additional IEP team meeting was held including a representative of the new placement. No indicates that the invited team members of the IEP team do not include both sending and receiving schools at the IEP meeting, or there's no evidence of the IEP team's efforts to ensure participation by the receiving school. Question number 11. Evidence that an IEP meeting was convened within 30 calendar days to review placement. And this has two different pieces to it, and it looks different than it did yesterday. So I'm not quite sure what happened here. Okay, so OOU5, evidence that the IEPT meeting was convened within 30 calendar days to review placement. Yes indicates that the written notice clearly documents that within 30 days of an out-of-unit placement, the IEP team met to review the placement, discuss LRE, and ensure that all IEP components remain appropriate. Or no, there's no documentation of a 30-day out-of-unit placement meeting to discuss LRE and ensure all IEP components are appropriate, or a meeting was held after 30 days. I'm just going to check no on this. There we go. Perfect. Okay. So this is the branching. This is a branching piece of the form, and it wasn't working correctly yesterday, but apparently now it is. So that is awesome. Okay. So number 12, OOU5 continued. If you answered no to number 11, which we did, there's no documentation of that 30-day out-of-unit placement to discuss LRE and ensure that all IEP components are appropriate, or a meeting was held after 30 days, we ask that you explain why to that question below. And so that one is a short answer. And you probably know that if you click yes, it's not going to give you the option to answer number 12. It's just going to skip you right along to answer 13. Question number 13. Which is LRE2, current annual written notice documented the discussion of LRE and any other options that the team, which includes the parent, considered, and the reasons why those options were rejected. So yes, the current annual written notice clearly documents the discussion of LRE, the options the IEP team considered, and reasons why the other options were rejected. Written notice section 4 is completed, and a no is that there is either a missing or incomplete written notice. Question number 14. which does not have its little code there, which it should, is IEP 1, this code for this. All IEPs from placement are included in the student's file, including amendments between annual IEP team meetings. So yes means that all the IEPs are from placement are in the file. No means in this case, this particular choice means that the district has not provided it or them. Or no, the district has not provided them, and we have the documentation to show our outreach efforts to the district to get missing documents using multiple avenues of contact and 3 or more attempts. So this monitoring period, last monitoring period, so FY24, for the first time, I was able to see corrective action while I was looking through the files. So if you, for instance, are someone who's had a corrective action plan that has an element in which you need to do a template letter to a district to get missing documents, if that is in the file and filled out with 3 or more attempts, and the email or the documentation of the phone call or whatever is attached to it, then I can see that corrective action there, and it will be counted as a minus for the district, but you will not be required to do any more corrective action because you already did it. So that speaks to that CAP sustainability piece that we all talked about during the spring. So let me just pause for a second. Does anyone have any questions as we've just started through this? Okay, I'm just going to continue on then. All right, 15, advanced written notice, AWN1, all advanced written notices from placement are included in the student's file. This has the same choices as the one above, either yes, no, the district has not provided them, or no, you haven't got it from the district, but you've done your corrective action already. And you have it to demonstrate while I'm looking at the files. Number 16 is WRN1. All written notices from placement, including determination for need of out-of-unit programming, which happens prior to the actual placement, are included in the student's file. And those are the same choices as the previous 2 questions that you are able to answer. Okay, we're going to get into the RAEs now, and these are all specific to having the different evaluations that you need to program for your students. So RAE2 is the most recent psychological evaluation being included in the student file. So the choices for this is yes, and it's less than 3 years old. Yes, and it's over 3 years old, and the IEP team documented in a written notice their decision to not update the eval. No, the district has not provided it, and no, you haven't gotten it from the district, and you've done your corrective action, and I can see it while I'm there. RAE3 looks at the most recent academic evaluations included in the file, and your choices have an extra on this one. So either yes, no, you haven't gotten it, or the IEP team documented that they didn't feel the need to have additional academic testing. The piece about corrective action is still there. And we added that the student does not have academic needs because we know that some of our kids come to us for functional needs. So in that case, you would check NA. RAE4 is the most recent speech or language evaluations being included in the file, and you will notice that they are the same selections for answers as the one above, including NA, that the student does not have speech or language needs. And for the OT evaluation piece, which is RAE5, it is the same menu of choices to answer as you have above. For the physical therapy evaluation piece, for those students who have that as a service or as a need, this is RAE6, and you'll notice that you have the same menu of choices. And we have 2 more RAEs. This one is for an FBA. And again, same choices. So you can say NA if the student doesn't have functional behavior needs. And then the last RAE is about other evaluations, and those could be an auditory evaluation or a functional eye assessment, for example. And those are just a couple of examples. There are many other choices that could be listed under other. And you will note that it is the same menu of choices as the other RAs above, RAE elements above. Okay, number 24 is element ISA1, a statement of supplementary aids and services and modifications to be provided to the student, including 1, the projected dates of the beginning and ending of the supplemental aids and services and modifications, 2, the position responsible, and the 3, location, the frequency and duration, and the frequency is number 4, and the duration. So you're looking for 5 different pieces. You're making sure that that section 6 grid doesn't have any blanks in it and that the information is correct in each row. So a yes for this question means that accommodations and modifications are determined by the IEP team, appropriately enable the student to progress on goals and access the general education setting, and are documented in the written notice and documented in the IEP. And that would include the projected dates for the beginning and ending of the supplemental aids and services and modification, position responsible, the location, the frequency, and the duration. And no is that the section 6 is either blank, it's incomplete, or it doesn't match the determinations that are documented in the written notice. ISR 1 is a statement of the special education and related services to be provided. So this is looking at the service grid in section 7. So yes on this indicates that the special education services, for example, SDI or speech, if speech is the primary area of disability, and specific related services like speech, OT, PT, counseling, etc., are identified on the IEP and are aligned to annual goals. And no, there are missing services or mismatched services are found on IEP team determinations. Section 26 is about the transition plan. So we're going to look at section 9 for those students who have transition plans in their IEPs to make sure that there is an appropriate measurable post-secondary goal addressing education or training after high school. So for this, yes means that the IEP contains an appropriate post-secondary goal in the area of education or training that's measurable, aligned with the student's present level of performance, and aligned with assessment results. No means that the IEP does not contain an appropriate post-secondary goal for education training. It's not measurable or doesn't align with present levels of performance and assessment. Or no, pardon me, NA, the student is not yet in 9th grade or beyond at the most recent annual review. Number 27 is looking at ITR 3, which is the IEP containing appropriate measurable post-secondary goals addressing employment after high school. So just like above, yes means that the IEP has a post-secondary goal in the area of employment, and it's measurable, aligns with the student's present level of performance, and aligns with assessment results. No would indicate that the IEP does not have a post-secondary goal for employment, or that it's not measurable or doesn't align with present levels or assessment results. Or NA means that the student was not yet in 9th grade or beyond at the most annual review. The last ITR, number 4, is for that independent living transition goal. So ITR 4 contains an appropriate measurable post-secondary goal addressing independent living after high school. You have the same 3 choices as above. You also have an NA because, as you know from your B13 training, an independent living goal is up to the discretion of the IEP team. So this can be NA. All right, I think we have 2 more pieces to look at. The first one is annual IEP4 academic annual progress of the student. So a yes indicates that the current academic goals progress from the prior year's academic goals, moving towards proficiency of grade level standards or the standards at which the student is performing. No, the current academic goals do not show progress from the prior year's academic goals, moving towards proficiency of grade level standards or the standards at which the student is performing. An NA indicates that no academic needs were identified, therefore no academic goals are required, or new goals were developed at the most recent IEPT meeting. And the last element is IFP4, functional development annual progress of the student. So this is just like the academic progress, except we're looking for functional progress. So yes would be that the current functional developmental goals show progress from the prior year's functional developmental goals in managing daily activities in cognitive, communicative, motor, adaptive, social, emotional, and sensory areas. No indicates that the current functional developmental goals do not show progress from the prior year's functional developmental goals in managing daily activities in cognition, communicative, motor, adaptive, social, emotional, and sensory areas. And NA would be that there's no functional developmental needs identified. Therefore, there are no functional developmental goals required, or new goals were developed at the most recent IEPT meeting. However, this is really not an option for students placed in an SPPS because all students placed in an out-of-unit placement have functional needs. So then you click submit. Oops, hold on a second. All right, and I am just going to turn you back over to Sarah so that we can continue on in the PowerPoint.
And while that transition is happening, thank you very much, Leora, for the thorough review of that process. I just wanted to make sure folks know too, should you choose to use the PowerPoint that you're going to get for PD with your folks.
Thank you.
Leora has graciously included snips of all the information that she just reviewed with you so that you'll have them. And that's part of the PowerPoint presentation. Again, thank you.
Okay, and I was supposed to keep control at this moment so that we can do our next check-in. I'm sorry, Sarah. So I'm going to share again. Oh my goodness gracious. Okay. And then I am going to pull up check-in number 4, which has 2 questions. So we would love it if you would just come on and answer these couple of questions for us. And these go over the questions that we just talked about from our last check-in number 3. So thank you guys who are doing this quickly for us. I'm just going to give another couple seconds, and then I'll look at the responses. Okay, I am going to view responses. So please choose only one district to represent on the self-assessment form. This is a true or false, and you are all absolutely correct that the answer is false because we want to see all the districts that you serve. And the second question is, if you have a common demographic of students, only choose them for the self-assessment, and you're 100% correct, all of you that picked false. I should probably preface that we practiced on this form yesterday, so the trues are probably from our practice. So yes, it is very true that we want to have a variety of student demographic information so that we have an accurate representation of the students who attend your school. Okay, and I think I really am stop sharing this point so that Sarah can take over again. Yes, okay.
And while that's happening, Erin, you want to ask your question?
One is sort of a confirmation and the other might be a question we want to table, but I just want to check in on something. So the first one is regarding the goals in the IEP related to transition plan. I'm pretty sure I remember the federal monitoring team sharing with the field that we no longer have to write something like given blah, blah, blah in order to achieve a order for admission to a post-secondary education, the student will blah, blah, blah. So we don't have to use that lingo anymore that identifies the post-secondary area that the goal is addressing. We just have to have a goal that makes sense for post-secondary transition planning, correct?
I'm going to defer to Mary on this question.
And I'm going to say we will pause and check with our expert folks on the federal monitoring team.
Okay. I feel like I remember I was doing some PD here at Morrison and Jennifer was helping. And I feel like I remember Jennifer saying that their goal is to hold us to the not minimum expectation, that doesn't sound good, but hold that to the federal standard, and the feds aren't requiring that, so they then wanted to pass that on to us. So that's
a good point, Erin. And again, we're going to rely on the folks that have expertise in the area that you're asking. And I will kind of emphasize what you just stated. The federal monitoring team has recently, after receiving technical assistance from federal folks, has peeled apart some of their work to really make a distinction between compliance and best practice. For those of you that have been involved in this process with us for more than one time already, you'll recall that we've always done that. We didn't use those words, compliance and best practice, but when you go through the site visit debrief with us, we always make a distinction between considerations, which are best practice, and recommendations, which are based on compliance. And so that has been a very focused emphasis over the past year. But again, we will check with our experts on the federal monitoring team, and somebody will get back to you, Erin.
Okay, so that sort of leads me to my next question, which might be a little more involved, and maybe it's something, I know this is a long presentation, so I don't want to make it any longer than it needs to be for folks. But so regarding the annual progress, having recently been involved in federal monitoring process at another school, that was not an item that the federal team was looking at based upon what you just said. That being said, another layer to my question is, when we're looking at annual progress for all of our students, some of whom have 15 to 30 goals in their IEP. My experience has been looking at in previous cohort groups I've been in, looking at every goal in this year's IEP, and then looking at every goal in the previous year's IEP, and looking kind of at both of them and seeing, is the student, for example, getting, we're looking at doing the goal independently versus with support, or we're looking at upping the criteria, or we're looking at more trials. Totally understand how to show annual progress, I think, but we could be looking at 600 goals for our kids. So are you asking us to just pull out a sample of a few goals here and there? Or are you looking at us to look at every single goal of our 10 students IEPs who could have 30 goals, looking at 2 different IEPs?
So during the file review, and Leora, please jump in because this is your area of expertise, but during the file review, my understanding is that the federal monitoring team has changed their practice from looking at the first 5 goals or first 5 something that they looked at, and now they're looking at everything because what they discussed and in review of their practice discovered that sometimes when they only looked at a specific number of the first ones that they looked at, they could have theoretically all been speech and language goals, for example. So they weren't looking at a cross representation. And so now I believe they're looking at every goal. Is that factual, Leora?
The federal monitoring team is not looking for annual progress anymore, either
No,
with academic
that's
or
not the
functional.
question I asked. I
Okay, sorry,
understand
I
that.
misunderstood. Sorry.
But when they're looking at goals, they look at all the goals to see for measurability and all of those things, right?
I am not sure.
Yeah. And so you are accurate, Aaron, in that they are not looking for annual progress. That has been a discussion that has been held, and we will continue to look at that because, as you know, when public schools place children in out of unit placements that are specifically SPPSs, which is what this team monitors, it is the most restrictive placement that a school is allowed to pick because schools can't place children in hospitals and schools don't place children in jail, right? So it's the most restrictive educational placement available to an IEP team. And so our team is electing to continue as part of the progress monitoring to monitor for annual progress for both academic and functional.
Oh,
And so, I'm sorry, what I have been doing, Erin, when I do the onset file review is exactly what you're talking about. I take the last annual IEP and I put it beside the current IEP and I compare to make sure that goals are adjusted in some way, just like you said. You know, maybe the child has more independence, maybe they have, you know, a different level of mastery. So that is what I'm looking for, just to make sure that the goals are, you know, changed, but also if for some reason the IEP team didn't change goals because maybe the child has a regressive condition, then I would look in the written notice and look for that statement in the written notice.
sure. No, I totally respect the rationale, especially regarding NGRF and all, you know, all of the emphasis on making sure that goals are reasonably calculated for progress and that the teams are currently monitoring them. It's definitely in the best interest of the student. I'm just concerned with the number of goals in this process that we're going to be looking at and the amount of time that that takes. I'm not exaggerating when I say it could be 300 goals. So I'm just putting that out there. We don't need to belabor this. I want to respect everybody's time, but I just want to put that out there for your team's consideration about the amount of work that just this indicator is going to put on our teams. And certainly respect whatever decision you make, but I felt really strongly that's an indicator in previous cohort groups I've been in that has just taken forever to do.
And I thank you for that feedback, Aaron. I would also suggest that you work with IEP teams because the IEP teams are the folks that create the goals. And when you're doing that with the being mindful of the intent, obviously we know you can meet more often than annually, but the intent of a creation of an annual IEP is to realistically outline goals that this person could meet within a year. And if you're looking at 20 or 30 or 40 goals for one kid, is that realistic given the population that your school serves, right? Like have those conversations within an IEP team too. Like, are you being realistic for this student and your staff with the idea of your goal is to help kids move along the continuum from one place to another and reevaluate that at least annually.
So does that mean? Yeah, sure. Understand that. There's just our population gets so many services. So it could be reasonable. You know, each provider could maybe only have 2 or 3 or maybe 4 goals, which is reasonable, but we've got, you know, 5, 6 related services and academics. So that's all. And I want to be really respectful. So I just wanted to sort of plant that seed for you guys, just to sort of bring some attention to the amount of goals in our self audit and your audit process that may be looking at, and just the time and intensity of that. But
right.
I don't want to, like I said, this is a long presentation. I really want to respect everybody's time.
Thank you, Erin.
All right. as we talked about at the beginning of the presentation, we're going to do some review. After the site visit and the desk audit, the department issues letters of findings, one following the site visit and debrief, and that summarizes the site visit monitoring activities findings, and the other following the evaluation of SPPS desk audit materials, and should be received at each SPPS in the cohort by March 6th of 2026. The letters will highlight accolades as well as communicate if there were findings of concern that might affect continued approval status. These are a summary of all the findings that were mentioned during the site visit and the desk audit. As I just noted, the site visit letter of finding has two components sent together in one comprehensive correspondence. The narrative, which captures the information from the site visit monitoring activities and is reviewed in the site visit debrief, and the evidence of correction grid, which is created by the Excel workbook from the site visit SPPS student file review. And there may be findings and therefore corrective activities requested for both parts. In review, the letter of finding reports include the summary of findings, evidence of correction grid from the site visit file review. It will be sent to both SPPSs and SAUs. It should be recognized that the letter of findings are informational for the SAU and no corrective activity will be required from the SAUs unless FAPE is impacted. SPPS file review corrective activity is for future work rather than fixing past errors. If training is required to address multiple findings in the file review, please send evidence that identifies all training provided for all the findings. And the examples we've given historically, OOU5, ISR1, and IEP1. In addition, for IEP corrections, please send IEPs developed after the findings were issued, which could be annual reviews, amendments, or drafts, if not yet approved and issued by the SAU. It is expected that 5 students' IEPs will show evidence for all the identified areas requiring correction on the IEP, 3 of which demonstrate required transition-related activity, corrective activity, if included in your SPPS findings. Therefore, a total of 5 IEPs should be submitted per SPPS site to demonstrate all necessary file review corrections. Note, only the portions of the IEP relevant to the SPPS monitoring will be evaluated on the IEPs that are selected for the file review. And when you're sending additional evidence that's required, please only scan, print, or copy the sections of the IEP that are requested for evidence review. Isolated deficiencies discovered during the file review that impact the provision of FAPE will need to be corrected and will be reported to the federal monitoring team. For example, neglecting to reduce the total specially designed instruction time by the amount of time the student receives related services at the frequency that's determined by the IEP team, which could result in compensatory education awarded through due process proceedings. Once you receive your letter of findings, you'll have until May 29th, 2026 to submit corrective evidence. Evidence that satisfies an element will result in such element not being on the corrective action plan. Outstanding findings on May 29th, 2026 will result in a corrective action plan for your SPPS. Corrective evidence is welcomed as early as it is completed. It's an interactive process with support and efforts to resolve deficiencies without issuing a cap. Early submissions are encouraged and reviews will be timely. Feedback will be provided and subsequent submissions reviewed with updated feedback upon review. And again, the corrective action plans will be issued for anything unresolved effective May 29th, 2026. The evidence of correction is due by October 3rd of 2026, and the approval letters will be sent by November 21st of 2026.
Mary, can I jump in with a clarification?
Sure.
The early submissions are encouraged, which is true, but please be mindful that desk audits cannot be submitted before the end of November, because you are collecting related service provider grids and perhaps some educational administrator supervision grids through November. So please be mindful. Desk audits can be submitted through December.
Yes, thank you for that clarification, Sarah. And just to add to that, many folks, for those of you that are new and never been through this process, many folks work on all the elements of the desk audit throughout the fall with components asking for feedback to make sure things are going to meet criteria. And so like Sarah just noted, Fergie just noted, obviously the review grids for service providers can't be submitted. But if you have the earlier versions and you want to make sure they're, for example, going to meet criteria and you have questions about them, the earlier versions can be sent to say, hey, what do you think about this? And those kind of things. And you don't have to wait to do all the small pieces. Approval could be impacted up to and including revocation for any schools that have not successfully resolved all the identified areas needing to be addressed in the CAP by October 3rd, 2026. The SAP team expects to support SPPSs in submitting all necessary evidence with evidence reviewed, all caps closed, and letters of continued approval sent by November 21st. Evidence, both initial and subsequent, may be submitted by email, which is our preferred method, by sending attachments to the SPPS GSS at .doe at maine.gov inbox. Sometimes there are technology difficulties when attempting to email large attachments. Please send your evidence in as few emails as technology allows. Some SPPSs have submitted folders through Google Docs or OneNote. Evidence may be submitted in the postal mail to the Department of Education, Office of Special Services and Inclusive Education, State Agency Programs Team, 23 State House Station, Augusta, Maine, 04333-0023. For the SPPSs identified as having fiscal audits, Barbara or Sarah McLaughlin will contact you to let you know of your participation. Barbara will need the following information from your agency: the audited financial statements for fiscal year 25, schedule of Maine Care revenue, written methodology and allocation of parent company overhead, copies of any management agreements with your agency's parent company, a breakdown of interest expense to asset, schedule of depreciation if your agency has any, and a list of all personnel from the staff pay sheet that includes each staff member's name, title, and annual salary. The SPPS fiscal monitoring consists of a desk audit, a site visit, a letter of finding, and an opportunity to respond in writing to the findings, which is due within 30 days of receipt of the letter of finding. The specific dates for SPPS fiscal monitoring activities will be outlined in the SPPS initial notification of fiscal monitoring.
Okay, so some important reminders. Please only send us the pertinent section of each IEP that you're sending for correction. Please label the submission with the pertinent OSR codes. So we want to know specifically what you want us to look at. One IEP should be sent and labeled with more than one code. If training is required to address multiple findings in the file review, please send evidence that identifies all training provided for all the findings. For example, OOU5, ISR1, and IEP1. Submit one draft letter to SAUs to address multiple file review findings. And if your organization uses a digital platform for student files, please reach out to me to make a plan for access. Does anyone have any wonderings, thoughts, or questions before we do an exit ticket and wrap up? Everyone's feeling good about it? All right, I am going to, if my mouse works, holy cannoli, here we go. All right, I am putting the exit ticket link in the chat, and I'm gonna share again, but we're not gonna switch back this time. I'm just gonna keep sharing until the end. Okay, so we don't want this one, we want this one. So there are 3 different questions for the webinar exit ticket. So if you could either scan the QR code that was on the slide, or use the link that's in the chat. We will do an exit ticket. Oh dear, something went wrong. Oh gracious. Oh, no. Okay, perfect. Somebody responded and it got a little excited for a minute there. Okay. So I'll just wait a minute and let a couple of other people respond, and then we can look at them, check in.
So the questions are, please share one thing that you learned about the SPPS monitoring process. Rate how well you understand the SPPS monitoring process, and then share a question that you have if you still have questions about the SPPS monitoring process.
Thank you. All right, you guys are on it. Thank you so much. Okay, let's just take a quick peek. We've got 6 responses so far. Thank you. So one thing that you learned about the process, that you should have different methods of communicate. Oops, hold on, let me get to the more detailed piece. Okay, that there's a new OSR tool, details about the desk audit and fiscal audit. Considerations are best practices and recommendations are compliance issues. You learned about due dates for the desk audit 1206 and the element needed that I can work on this fall. That you need to include related service providers' license numbers. Somebody learned that you should have different methods of communicating with SAUs if you don't have a required desk audit document. Yep. It's a year-long process with lots to do. The new OSR tool is a great improvement. Awesome. I'm very happy to hear that you guys are good with that. This is my first time going through the process, so to say, at the least, I have learned a lot. And please do not hesitate to reach out to us when you come across things that you're not sure about. Like, we want to make this process as easy as possible for you. Someone learned more details about the desk audits, and one person, it's their first webinar. Awesome. All right, and we will look at number 2, how people are feeling. So it looks like, hold on, maybe it would be easier to look. Okay, so it looks like most of you are feeling pretty good about understanding the process. I'm hoping that whoever picked level 1, and we don't know because they're anonymous, as you could probably tell, that you would reach out to us so that we can help you understand it better, and we can walk you through the process with as much help as you need. And the last one is, please share a question that you still have about the SPPS monitoring process. The tiers for future monitoring. Yes. So this cohort, you guys have, you're sort of our test cohort for a couple of different things. One was the CAP sustainability meetings that you all came to, that we talked at this springtime. That was a first for the team. And yes, you will be the first cohort that we are looking at placing on our tiers. So that is a really great point. So thank you for that.
I'm sorry, I just wanted to add to that. For those of you that were able to attend our last SPPS directors meeting last month, Leora actually provided an overview of the draft. It is in process. As you can imagine, it was recently implemented by the federal monitoring team, and we, our state agency programs team, worked with the federal monitoring team to understand the process as well as some successes and challenges along the way. And so more information will come out as the draft moves into more final stages.
Awesome. Between what dates should the self-audit be completed? Do we have a recommendation for that?
So the self-audit is a part of one component of the desk audit, right? The 12 pieces that we reviewed today. And that is due by January 2nd. Really, it's up to you and your agency of how you want to do that. Some directors, in my experience over the last 8 seasons, has been that some folks like to start that process early and make corrections prior to, if they make discoveries, make corrections prior to the department coming, or the state agency programs team coming to review files. Some folks, because life is busy, have other things they need to focus on, and they do it at the end of the season. That's completely up to you. So great question.
Thank you for that. So we have a question. Is there a way to make it a more efficient audit process versus than taking 18 months? And that would be a Mary question as well.
I'm not sure what somebody's referencing in terms of taking 18 months. I will tell you that some of the pieces that are included in this audit process involve partners across the floor. As you might recall, when we were reviewing the components of the desk audit, there are pieces in there that are part of Title 20A that are required for every school, whether you're a private school or a public school. And those pieces are looked at as part of the desk audit. For example, the credentialing of staff that Fergie reviewed. As she noted, some staff, education staff, are certified. Other staff, the clinical medical staff, are licensed, right? And they still have to, even though they don't have a certification in Department of Education, they have to be listed with their fingerprints. And we have to go to external sites to check their licenses. And so that's a piece out of Chapter 115 in Title 20A that we work with our partners across the floor. Another example is Chapter 33 requirements. Those are responsibilities that are held regardless of whether you're a private or a public school. And because those laws that I just gave examples of are some of the ones in our desk audit that are managed by other teams at the department. Sometimes the timeline is impacted by work with other folks. And so as an example, and I'm thinking this might be part of it, as an example, a prior audit, prior monitoring season had an agency that had some significant findings regarding Chapter 33. And that particular office had turnover in staff and people out. And so there was a lengthier process than normal because of temporary, those things happen. They happen to you guys with your staff and having to utilize long-term subs, for example. So I'm thinking that must be the spirit of that question. But there are sometimes factors that we have no control over.
And Mary, could I add that we've been talking about this as an interactive process, and folks can submit whatever evidence they can as soon as they get it. It's been my experience that very, very rarely have we taken the full time, but also needing those few weeks or months in between has been necessary for some people to pull their evidence together, and also for us to be able to attend to what you folks are sending in.
That's a really good point too, Sarah. We didn't actually talk about this today, so thank you for piping in, because you just jogged a memory for me. For folks who may not have been part of this process before and wouldn't have this reference, we talked about the desk audit being due on January 2nd of 2026, and that is true. Here's something else that is also true based on what Fergie was just sharing with you. We often, because life happens, right? Often get requests by our SPPS partners. For example, it happened a lot during the pandemic for an extension. And one time, the desk audit was due in January, or the end of December, and we actually got it submitted by an agency by the end of June, right? Because they needed that extra time to gather their evidence. And we have worked very cooperatively, supportively, and granted extensions. So sometimes, as Sarah noted, the extended time wasn't because the department wasn't being responsive. It was because we granted additional time for our partners to pull together the information that they needed to submit. So thank you.
Thank you. A couple of people can't think of any questions right now. Somebody said that information around monitoring of IEP goals progress is still muddy, and I am happy to, I have a note to reach out to Jennifer Gleason to get some clarity on their practice about how many of the goals that they are looking at this point. Do community jobs count towards transition plan and or LRE within the SPPS?
Can you repeat that?
Yes. Do community jobs count towards transition plans and or LRE within the SPPS?
Oh, that is an excellent question. And yes, you know, I mean, the population that you're doing LRE experiences for should account for any kind of integration. So a job in the community could be part of that. Especially if it's something that's identified on the student's transition plan or IEP, right, as a goal. And looking at the other end of the spectrum, if you have somebody who is a youth that really likes baseball, and they're as a person who isn't old enough to be involved in baseball because it doesn't typically start in kindergarten, first, second, third grade, those are usually community activities run through a town rec department, for example, where I live. And so somebody might want to be involved in T-ball, right? Anything that is helping a youth be able to be integrated with, involved with the things that they are passionate about, are interested in, and expose them to their non-disabled peers is considered LRE. So thank you for that great question.
Awesome. Thank you, Mary.
Yeah.
Not sure how the fiscal monitoring fits in. They may need help later, but the good news is that if you don't hear from Barbara about fiscal monitoring, then you're all set. And if you do hear from Barbara about fiscal monitoring, she has some wonderful folks on her team who will help you through that process, just like we will help you through this process. Do you need grids for supervisions?
We need supervision logs. I'm not sure what folks or the person who asked the question in terms of a grid, but supervision logs are in my experience and the time that we've been here, typically they involve who is the 030 or 035 that is providing the supervision. If you're using that, the second model that Fergie outlined earlier, where your full-time school administrator is an 282 or 286 or an 079. So the logs would need to have identified who the person is, when the supervision occurred, so dates, topics that are covered. We don't necessarily need a word for word, summary of what each supervision is. People do things differently. If you want to submit those and do random ones over time, that's, what we asked for is some samples that occur during the each month of the year. You might want to pick one or two and say, in a statement, I hold supervisions, or this person holds supervisions on, whatever it is, the first Wednesday of every month. As Sarah Fergie outlined earlier, it's a minimum of 5 hours a month. Some folks just do the 5 hours. Some folks provide contracts or have their employed person do more than 5 hours. And whatever you want to submit that meets the criteria is fine.
Awesome. Thank you.
Yeah.
So we have a couple of people that don't have questions. Someone is feeling that it is just so overwhelming. Somebody.
Well, as Leora stated, and all of us actually during our time with you this morning, that's understandable. There's a lot, and we are here to support you. You can reach out by email, reach out by phone, and this webinar is recorded so that you can go back, just like we do with our students in the classroom, right? Sometimes repetition is needed for many reasons. And sometimes you want to use the same information with your folks who are, like you might want to review with your related service providers, just the piece that has to do with them so that they know what the expectations are. At any rate, just know we're here to support you.
We have a couple questions in the chat box. The PowerPoint will be available. Will the transcript come at the same time? Do we send out transcripts for these recordings, Mary?
The DOE process is we have to send out a PDF.
Okay, thank you for that. And I think, go ahead.
Yeah, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Nope. I was just going to say, Kim had a question on related service grids. Do we need to include family therapy? And Sarah answered, if family therapy is an IEP service, then yes.
Perfect.
And we just have a couple more things. So somebody has 7 children leaving and 7 new coming in August. How to compare information from last school year to current school year?
For new admissions, I'm thinking that's what they're talking about. When you go in, Leora, don't you look at the prior annual, right? Like that's part of your referral process, which is one of the things that we ask about when we're on site. So if you don't have one in writing, you might want to be working on that. But part of your referral process in order to effectively evaluate whether a youth, whether your company, your agency is able to address whatever the referral concerns are that the SAU is sending you effectively, you have to look at certain information, right? Like the IP, evaluations, sometimes folks do observations, whatever that process is. And so when Leora does the file review for new admissions, we would expect to see the IEP that the student came in on as the former annual, and compare it to whatever there is that's existing, whether the IEP had amendments at the 30-day or has been there long enough to have an annual, because as we know, annuals happen at any time of year. Could be October, it could be May, right?
All right. This is a good question. What's the best way to manage getting things prepared for the audit?
I think that might be a great question to ask your colleagues. So we could have folks on the screen that have been through it before, give their perspectives as the people that are doing the managing. And for those of you that come to our monthly meetings, the SBPS directors meetings, it might be a great question to ask if you want to have a wider perspective at the during each of our SPPS monthly director meetings. We have a standing agenda item where you are given space to ask questions of your colleagues, and that's a great question that you could ask a wider audience if you so choose. Anybody want to pipe up?
Sorry.
That's okay. I just was wondering to give this person that's asking the question some time and space. If there's anybody here that's been through SPPS monitoring previously, if you would like to help answer this question. And hearing none, I would suggest whoever asked that consider reaching out to the larger group.
Okay, one last answer here. So this person is going to ask their team about whether they are one agency with multiple sites or each location will have a file review for all students. And if you have multiple sites, I would encourage you to probably reach out to one of us for that conversation as well, because we do go to multiple sites if you have them. So that might be something that you might want to talk to us about and plan as well. Do you have anything to add to that piece, Mary? Awesome. Okay, so I believe that was our last question. So let me get the PowerPoint back over and we will wrap up. Okay, and my mouse picks, of course, the worst times to give me trouble because that's the way it works. Okay, can you guys see the PowerPoint now?
We can. And
wonderful.
On slide
All right,
65.
there we go. Okay. Thank you.
So here is our SAP team contact information. It has our names, our phone numbers, email addresses. It does also include Barbara McGowan, Director of Fiscal Management, down at the bottom. So you guys will have this if you need to get in touch with any of us. And then the next one is how to find us online.
Oopsie, sorry.
You're fine. Okay. Different ways. We are on Facebook. You know, you can email us or you can look online.
And all of the, in case you want to use this as PD, all of the links that Leora was putting in our chat are available on the final slide of our deck, so that you can use that with your staff members. If you wanted to have some kind of a tool or use this as an example, if you want to have some kind of a formative assessment piece built in for interactivity. And I also want to take the opportunity to say that I noticed that we had several SAU partners on our participating in our webinar today. Thank you very much for your time. And again, know we're here to support. Reach out at any time, by phone, by email. Thank you all.